So I think something that gets overlooked a lot when running an agency is client satisfaction and service delivery. A lot of the times people, including myself, like we get so focused on trying to sign that client that once we do end up signing that client, it's almost like we kind of leave them alone, um, almost like ignore them a bit, and then just try to sign that next client. But what ends up happening is um, because you miss out on like the most basic things, and because um, your attention just drifts away from that client, the client notices, and then they get kind of turned off, they get upset, and worst case scenario, you end up losing that client. So in this video, I'm going to cover three small points that might seem pretty basic, but a lot of people tend to overlook and forget about. So the first thing is timing. So for me, when I signed my first client, I didn't have someone on standby, like a service delivery person, to actually deliver the services. So I signed my client, and I had to then go look for somebody to work with that client, and that caused delays. Um, like there were payment issues, and it took like another week or two to actually get started. Luckily, the client was patient enough to, and they weren't in a rush. But even like to this day, I've lost a couple clients, simply because I kept doing this. I never had someone on standby, kind of ready to get started right away. So I was always looking for a team member, looking for a service delivery person after I signed a client, which I think is a very bad way to go about your business model. So that's one thing I would have fixed. I would have, or which I did fix, but something I would have done in the from the very beginning was make sure I had somebody who was ready to help me, um, get all the systems and softwares ready, whatever it is. Just get everything ready before you actually go out and try to sign a client. That way, once you do sign the client, you're able to get started like the next day. So that was point number one. Point number two, which kind of ties into it, is make sure you're always, or make sure you focus on quality. Don't skimp out on quality. A big mistake that I made when I first started out was trying to go as cheap as possible. So when I was looking for a team member or a service delivery person to work with me, I wanted to go as cheap as possible simply because I wanted to keep my profit margins as high as possible. But I found that, or what tends to happen when you go cheap, is the quality of work, the quality of person that you get with that work, um, tends to get lowered as well. And it ends up, it never works out. It's not worth it. So I would say don't skimp out on quality. Make sure you're always delivering the best work. Put your team member or your freelancer or your service delivery person through a bunch of interviews, by you. Make sure you take a look at their work. Make sure they're a trustworthy person. Make sure they're available often. Um, and yeah, that's something that I would have done differently when I first started. And point three is communication. I think honestly, communication, like just communication as in you and the client, I think that's honestly, it can arguably be more important than the actual service delivery, because turns out there's a lot of people that can offer, your services, um, that can deliver quality work, but there's not a lot of people that communicate as well as you would think, um, or there's not a lot of people that will be available as often as you think. So if you're able to stand out from the crowd and be someone who can deliver quality work as well as be available and communicate often with the client, I think that itself would make you stand out a lot more. So for me in the beginning, I wasn't very communicative. Once I signed a client, I kind of just not ignored, but kind of pushed them aside so I can focus on getting the next client and signing the next client. Um, but it turns out that's a really bad idea. I've lost a couple clients simply because I wasn't communicating enough. I've had a client literally tell me that I don't care how bad or what happened or what the update is. I want you to tell me. And because I didn't do that, the client just left. Um, and they told me they weren't satisfied with the communication and things like that. And this happened like multiple times, um, which is pretty bad. So I'm not perfect in any way at all. I've made tons of mistakes, and I still do, um, in this business, in my agency. But something that I learned is to just make sure you're communicating with the client. Um, it's always better to just keep the client in the loop, let them know what's going on, and then you'll find a lot of the times that they'll appreciate you communicating with them. So I think it's really important to set up some sort of communication platform between you and the client, and also like your team member if needed. But set up some sort of communication platform like a WhatsApp group or like a Slack channel or Skype group or something like that, simply for communication. Like that's how important communication is, especially in the beginning. Um, Unless the client is telling you like, "Hey, I don't want you to really bother me or talk to me anymore with these updates," which I've been doing this for like 10 months now, and no one's ever messaged me that, or no client has ever told me to do less communication with them. But I've had clients tell me that they want more communication. So I would say it's better to over communicate than under communicate. Keep clients in the loop, let them know what's going on with updates, um, and yeah, just communicate. I think that's one of the most important things in service delivery and client satisfaction.